My friends, I know we're coming to the end of our service, that a number of you are looking at your watches and seeing that it says 12 o'clock and you're thinking about that Kiddush. I know we have a 1200 club, as we call it here. They're the folks who insist that I end services at 12 o'clock. And I'm trying. Folks, I'm really trying. But something unfolded over the course of this week that, quite honestly, to not take at least a few minutes to address it would be an absolute dereliction of duty on my part as a rabbi and as a leader of a community. And so I will take just a few minutes and try to keep my comments brief, succinct, and on point, but to share something I think to be essential and important for us to realize. This past week, the news has been focused on issues of Crimea, Ukraine, and the flight from Malaysian Airlines that has disappeared. And in the course of all of that, an important news item did not really get the play that I believe it deserves. And that is, this past week, Mahmoud Abbas was here in Washington, D.C., and met with President Obama. And in the course of the press conference and in his returning to Palestine, he noted the following. He said no, 3 no's. And among the 3 no's that he said, the most troubling, the one that we have to be aware of and most conscious of, is he said no to the recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. Now, there are some who will say that this is purely symbolic, and why are we worried about it? There will be those who will note that hasn't the Palestinian Authority already done something like this? But my friends, I would come back and say that whatever the Palestinian Authority have done is not sufficient. And the fact is, if they said it once, then saying it again and again and again should not really be a problem. And asking for someone with whom one is partnering to create a framework, to create a peace, so that there can be a Jewish state and a Palestinian state, it really shouldn't be too much to ask for the leader of those negotiations to be able to affirm that Israel is indeed a Jewish state. And again, there'll be those who say, but it's simply symbolic. Why hold everything up because of a symbolic gesture? And my friends, I will tell you, symbols matter. Evan spoke about symbols in his drasha. He spoke about the para aduma, about the red heifer, and its symbolic power. We talked about and read about the initiation rituals of the priests into the priesthood, all of symbolic value. But symbols matter, and they have a practical effect. Because what people don't articulate about the importance of this symbol is this, that when the Palestinians acknowledge that Israel is in fact to be a Jewish state, they are granting legitimacy to our cause in the eyes of the rest of the world. We don't need the legitimacy for ourselves, I should certainly hope. But the rest of the world needs to understand that it's not just the Jews who believe that we have a legitimate claim to a home in the land of Israel, but the rest of the world needs to do this as well. And it is, as Ari Shavit, a columnist for Haaretz and the author of a brilliant book called My Promised Land, it is, as he said at the AIPAC Policy Conference just last month, the only thing that the Palestinians can actually give in these negotiations. They can't give land. We're the ones giving the land. They can't give resources. They have precious few. We are the ones who are giving resources. The one thing the Palestinians can bring to the table is imparting a sense of legitimacy to the rest of the world that Israel is our homeland, and we have a right to be there. It is the one and only thing they can really give, and it's something they continually deny. And we need to understand this. We need to understand this because undoubtedly there will be those those who feel negatively towards Israel, who feel maybe ambiguous towards Israel, those who hate Israel, who will jump on this when Netanyahu does the only responsible thing I believe he can do as the Israeli prime minister, and say, if you're not going to recognize us, we cannot have a framework. There will be those who will jump on that and say, look, once again, the Israelis are holding up the peace process. It is their fault that there isn't peace. They are the ones who present the obstacles. Getting all hung up over such a small symbolic thing. We have to be the ones to respond. We are all Israel's ambassadors on these kinds of issues. And we have to be willing to step forward. And to step forward, we have to know. And this is why I share with you today, taking up some of our time, so that you and I know and understand exactly what is at stake, and not minimize it, and not let others take advantage of this. This week's Torah portion is called Parshat Shmini, because it is on the 8th day that Aaron and his sons and the temple become initiated. The 8th day, although not seen as a symbolic number or a very powerful number, actually within Judaism I would suggest is perhaps the most powerful, the most symbolic, and the most telling of who we are. If you look at next week's Torah portion, it says that a male child is to be circumcised on the 8th day. Why do we have our sons initiated into the covenant on the 8th day? Because on the first day, God created light. And on the next days that follow, God creates the rest of the world. It unfolds until we end with humanity at the end of the 6th day. Then there's Shabbat. And then the week begins again. And in the week beginning again, there is something different about the world. There's something that God has now that God did not have before. With the creation of humanity, God now has a partner. God has someone to be in relationship with. Hence, the 8th day becomes the day that symbolizes covenant. That is why our sons are circumcised on the 8th day. That is why we have the initiation of the temple on the 8th day. That is why we light the flame on the 8th day, called Havdalah. We light the fire. And in lighting that fire, we join ourselves to the initial light that God created at the very beginning of humanity. And with the lighting of that fire, we say we join with God. Because Judaism understands that there can be no holiness, there can be no sanctity, there can be no meaning, there can be no peace in our world unless we have a partner with whom to make peace, with whom we work together to create peace. This is how Judaism understands its relationship with God, with people, and with our world. And if we hold on to this wisdom, we understand exactly what it means when Mahmoud Abbas says, I will not recognize Israel as a Jewish state. In my mind, political novice and politically illiterate as I will claim to be, as I think most people really are, unless you're actually sitting at the table, actually involved in the negotiations, actually sitting there and supporting them. But to my ignorant, illiterate self, what this does is set all of us on a course of disaster and travesty. And it reminds us of what we need to be doing to defend Israel in terms of how people will criticize Israel for this, and also remind us that we must be strong. We are one people, one diverse, scattered, and yes, dysfunctional people. But we are stronger when we realize a common goal. And this has to be one of those goals with which we partner with one another and with all those who understand the right that we have to a Jewish homeland to fight and to defend and to support. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.